Just like we expected, no big moves for the first day of free agency for the New Orleans Saints, but the NFC South did just get a little tougher. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints. I'm your host, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, New Orleans Saints expert, your credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode, even though the New Orleans Saints didn't make any big moves day one of free agency, just like we expected, they did see a little bit of attrition. One of those players, Zack Baun, expected to head to Philadelphia. We'll discuss why that's a perfect fit for him, what the New Orleans Saints should have done, and now what they have to do after his loss. We're also going to take a look at the potential for a new veteran backup quarterback in New Orleans, as rumors are spiraling that Jameis Winston could already have a potential landing spot. But to kick everything off, we're going to start with Kirk Cousins landing in the NFC South for the Atlanta Falcons. Why? It's a bad move in terms of what the New Orleans Saints projections are, but how they can still handle it. We got all that for you on today's episode. Appreciate you very much being an everydayer and making us your first listen of the day here on the Locked On Saints podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Get $200 in bonus bets as a new customer if your first $5 bet, wins. That's $200 in bonus bets if that bet wins. Head over to FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. Well, the NFC South just got a lot tougher with Kirk Cousins landing as the new starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. It's not a long-term move, but it's enough of a move that should annoy you if you're a New Orleans Saints fan, because it does help to make the Atlanta Falcons just that little bitty bit much better. So I want to break down why Kirk Cousins landing in Atlanta is not something that we should shake a stick at, turn up our noses at, or anything. It's a good signing for Atlanta, who has had a better than solid offseason so far over the course of this year. Now, I'm not here to praise the Atlanta Falcons in your face at all, but I'm just here to kind of say, hey, New Orleans Saints might want to start to get working so you can keep up within the division. But remember, off-season winners, free agency winners, very rarely division winners, very rarely Super Bowl champions for that matter either. So look, it's not the worst case scenario for the New Orleans Saints, but it ain't the best case scenario for the New Orleans Saints with Kirk Cousins becoming the new starting quarterback in Atlanta. It's a 4-year deal, $180 million, well over the amount that the New Orleans Saints took in and started to spend on Derek Carr. $90 million guaranteed in the first two seasons. So you're really looking at a $45 million per year kind of deal with those guarantees. So, people can say what they want to say about Derek Carr's contract. You look at Baker Mayfield's contract, you look at Kirk Cousins' contract, and now it all makes sense. The Saints were just kind of a year early on all of it. Let's take a look at what Kirk Cousins has done against the New Orleans Saints in the last 5 games. Zach Ewing posting this from over at NOLA.com, averaged over a 313 passing yard average per game in his 5 contests against New Orleans, 13 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Now, you might hear that, and there's 2 ways that you can go with that, right? Oh my goodness, Kirk Cousins is the greatest quarterback of all. No, I'm just kidding. But oh my goodness, Kirk Cousins has torn up the Saints defense a little bit more than you might imagine. But also you can look at it and say, well, the weapons that he had, Justin Jefferson, especially in Minneapolis, was a big part of that. And you're not wrong. Justin Jefferson is better than Drake London. Justin Jefferson is better than Kyle Pitts. However, the issue when it comes to Atlanta is that they've got Bijan Robinson, they've got Tyler Algier, they've got Drake London, they've got they've got Kyle Pitts all at the same time. So this might be the best young core altogether, several players across the different skill positions that Kirk Cousins has ever been around. And they have a top 10 draft pick with the potential to be able to add something to that. Now, they could go defense as well and take my precious Dallas Turner pick away from me, which I would be very upset with. But there is a chance that they go on the defensive side as well, now that they don't necessarily have to go quarterback. Or they could still go quarterback. I mean, you talk to anybody over in Atlanta right now, it's a 4-year deal for Kirk Cousins, but people are effectively expecting the possibility that it's effectively like 2 years that they're really actually committing to him, which is where the majority of the guaranteed money is. Just to kind of break that down for you, it's a 4-year contract, $100 million of it is guaranteed over the life of the contract, but only $10 million in the third season is guaranteed, while the full $90 million over the first 2 years is completely guaranteed. So people are looking at it as a 2-year contract, but I would expect some restructures, things like that to happen. It is Terry Fontenot over there as a general manager, so he did learn from the best when it comes to the restructure game out here. Here's one thing that I will say about Kirk Cousins, though, is that he does make good decisions until he doesn't, right? So he makes good decisions, and then once he makes a bad decision, he tends to continue to make bad decisions. It's kind of like a floodgate that opens a little bit. But for the most part, he makes good decisions. Only 2 interceptions against the New Orleans Saints, and the Saints are a team that has 61 interceptions since 2020. That's the 5th most out of teams in the NFL during that span. Believe it or not, the Saints, who had just 7 interceptions in 2022, they've had 18 in 2020, 18 in 2021, 18 last year in 2023. And so they gave them 61 with the 7 back in 2022. That put them with the 5th most in the NFL, with some, teams that are tied at like 68 and stuff like that. But they are the 5th highest when it comes to that total, or it is the 5th highest total. So you have to give him a little bit of credit for taking care of the football, because 2 interceptions over the course of 5 games, that's a top 5, team in terms of interception accumulation over the course of the past 4 seasons. That's not really about the weapons that are around him. That's just about him making good decisions. Now, where the Saints won on this, though, is that they have a very good secondary and a very good defense that can open those floodgates for Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins will be in a new system that he's having to learn, that's being implemented for the first time with Zack Robinson over there. That's something you're looking at in New Orleans as well. But there you've got new quarterback and new system. And the Saints also kind of won a little bit here with the fact that it's not Justin Fields, it's not Russell Wilson, which means they don't have to deal with the mobile quarterback being added to the NFC South. Baker Mayfield's pesky. Kirk Cousins is not very mobile, so you get out of the Matt Ryan sort of statuesque quarterback days of just standing there in the pocket and delivering. Then you get a little bit younger, and Desmond Ridder moving around, Taylor Heineke, Marcus Mariota, all those guys can move a little bit. And then now you get back to a guy that can escape, but isn't a mobile quarterback by any stretch of the imagination. So maybe that helps the Saints pass rush a little bit within the division, getting back onto that situation. As long as they can start to top the Atlanta Falcons offensive line in the process. But not having Justin Fields, not having Russell Wilson in the division does keep that mobile quarterback by trade out of the division, which is a nice thing for the New Orleans Saints, who just lost Zack Baun, which we'll discuss a little bit later on in the show. But obviously that has a big impact of your ability to be able to match up with those mobile quarterbacks because of what he was able to do to aid you in that in 2023. So people are going to want to rank the division's quarterbacks, and people are going to say Kirk Cousins is the best quarterback in the NFC South, that Derek Carr is like the 3rd best, and he's behind Baker Mayfield, who won a playoff game, all these other things. Rank away, have a wonderful time with it, but I will tell you this. The true ranking of the NFC South quarterbacks is going to come down to the weapons that are around them and the system. Because if you really look at it, they're all just different versions of one another, including Bryce Young, who's just a shorter version of the same quarterback. So for me, I'm not worried about ranking these quarterbacks right now, but I can't wait to see how the division falls quarterback play-wise by the end of this season. Because you've gone from one of the worst quarterbacks or quarterback groupings in the NFL in this division to at least somewhat respectable within the division. And I think that makes for good football. That's the way that I look at it. So I think the Saints are going to be fine with Kirk Cousins, but I will say that Kirk Cousins, as somebody that elevates talent around him like a good quarterback should, is going to be pesky and is not somebody that you just look at and go, oh, okay, they just signed Kirk Cousins. No big deal. The New Orleans Saints need to get rolling here in free agency, acquiring talent and building that roster so that they're ready for the challenge ahead. And speaking of challenges ahead, one of them might be finding a new backup quarterback in their system, because Jameis Winston already has a suitor. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more with the #1 sportsbook in America. Right now, you could say goodbye to all the busted brackets, because over at FanDuel, they're going to let you bet on every game all throughout the tournament. You ain't got to worry about, being out once one team gets eliminated or anything like that. You're good to go for every single game, men's side, women's side, however it is that you want to go about it. So whether you're betting on a big upset or you're betting on the favorite 1 seed, it's time to go dancing into America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers are going to get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So go pick one of those outweighted matchups of the #1 seed going up against the last seed and make sure that you end up winning that $5 bet, because you'll win a little bit off of that, but then you also get that $200 in bonus bets you can use on point spreads, money lines, and much more. And of course, you can even pick who you think will win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops till they cut the nets down. All right, family, continuing on today. It looks like Jameis Winston already has a potential landing spot and certainly has a suitor up in Cleveland. We appreciate you very much for being here for another episode of Locked On Saints. Thank you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day for your second listen. You want to know everything going on around NFL free agency? Great way to get it all done from all the local experts who know what they're talking about. You can find it over at Locked On Sports Today, the first ever, YouTube's first ever national sports 24/7 stream, which you can also find on your free Fire TV channels as well. Locked On Sports Today. So, the New Orleans Saints might end up being in the market for a new veteran backup quarterback. We're going to discuss who those possibilities are, why it's important, what it means for Jake Haener, and how it all gets set into action, which begins with a report from Cleveland.com. Mary Kay Abbott, who is absolutely awesome, doing a great report on the fact that the Cleveland Browns seem to be interested in Jameis Winston being the backup quarterback for Deshaun Watson. So if he is signed, then that would mean that the New Orleans Saints lose their veteran backup quarterback and could be in the market there. Now, this is what we've expected all along, is that Jameis Winston will very likely leave. I think that the Saints should fight to keep him, but very likely that he would end up going out. He told Kyle T. Mosley, a good friend and site expert over at Saints News Network, that he wanted to go and look for a starting role in the NFL somewhere. Dennis Allen told us during the combine that he was aware of those comments. So, I don't think that you're upset about those comments. I think that, like, if you're a quarterback in the NFL, yeah, you want an opportunity to start somewhere. So, taking a backup role to Deshaun Watson in Cleveland maybe doesn't sound like that direct a path, but maybe it's a little bit more of a direct path to being a starter than we expect. Like, maybe he could eventually take over as a starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, because Deshaun Watson has not looked good since his return to football. And trust me, he has been amongst very not good looks, nonetheless, as we all are aware. So this would leave the New Orleans Saints without a veteran backup, but they would still have Jake Haener as a long-term backup option, and they like him in that role. Again, it's very rare that sub 6 foot quarterbacks pan out in the NFL. And I know that people can go ahead and rattle off, 4 names, but those guys are the exception, not the norm. And as of right now, we haven't seen anything that says that Jake Haener is the exception, but that's okay. His role right now is not to become the next starting quarterback of the New Orleans Saints. So there's no pressure for that. It's just, hey, be the backup, be the guy that speaks the same language as Derek Carr and help him out. So if the Saints wanted to go the route of a veteran backup, however, they could absolutely find that. There are some options, even though the easiest one is now off the board with Sam Darnold having signed with the Minnesota Vikings. Darnold played in San Francisco last year, so he could have helped to translate the system a bit, has played in the NFC South, though poorly, for the Carolina Panthers. I wouldn't tell you that I would believe in him to come in and win you a game, but could he come in and help you to translate the San Francisco system to your system, help you bridge some of the gaps in terms of what you want to keep from your system and what you're bringing in that's new, all those things? Yes, that's where I think that Sam Darnold could have been helpful. But if you would ask me, have Sam Darnold come in and be the veteran backup quarterback, but then if anything happens and somebody's got to go out there to play, put Jake Haener out there. You know what I mean? So, like, unless you're treating him as the emergency third quarterback, which then would make that not an option. But, you know what I mean? I don't think that I would, or put Taysom Hill out there and let him do it, not Sam Darnold, right? So there are some other options that are out there. If you're looking for veteran backups that might be able to either help you translate the game or potentially come in and help you win a game, should they need to. Ryan Tannehill, of course, is on that list. Josh Dobbs, who we saw, pull off a lot of impressive things early on in his tenure with Minnesota, but not so much after he played against the New Orleans Saints. Funny how that should happen. But then you also look at another guy that was with the San Francisco 49ers last year, in addition to Sam Darnold, was Brandon Allen, another guy that, 31 years old, he's a veteran guy. He's got a little bit of experience. He spent some time in that San Francisco system. And so maybe he's a guy that could come in on a minimum deal that helps you translate the system to your starting quarterback. Now, the other one that I want to keep an eye out on, and I want to give a shout out to Elaine Robert, who pointed this out, a viewer of the show who commented on YouTube with this idea, which I think is a good possibility and something to maybe keep an eye out on after training camp before the season begins. The Jacksonville Jaguars traded with the New England Patriots to get Mac Jones to Jacksonville. And so now there's going to be a competition, a battle between Mac Jones and CJ Beathard to see who will be the backup quarterback to Trevor Lawrence. Once that battle is done, there's a chance that the loser of that battle hits the market. In particular for me, CJ Beathard, if he were to hit the market, he's the guy that makes a lot of sense to potentially bring in. First of all, he spent time in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan 2017 through 2020, so he helps you bridge the gap, helps you keep the system translated, helps you communicate on the sideline with the quarterback, which is kind of the primary, like 90% of the role of the backup quarterback, right? On game day, right? And then 10% becomes 100% real fast if you've got to go in for your starting quarterback. But for the most part, most of the time, you're on the sideline looking at, screenshots, helping break down defenses, helping make adjustments with the starting quarterback possession to possession, giving them another pair of quarterback eyes, quarterback brain to help out with all that, in addition to the coaching and everything, of course, that's happening on the sideline. So CJ Beathard, a guy with intimate knowledge of the Shanahan system, the wide zone systems, all those other things, could be a pretty interesting option. And he has started and played at the NFL level and had to go in and, hasn't been, supremely successful by any stretch of the imagination, but is somebody that can go out there and play on the field if you needed him to. Now, can Jake Haener be the guy behind Carr? Yes, of course, because I don't want to leave Jake Haener out of the conversation. We acknowledged him a little bit earlier. I don't think that he's going to be your starting quarterback, at any point in his career for the New Orleans Saints, at least. But I do think that still getting a veteran option between he and Derek Carr is a good call. It's a good idea, at least for one more year before, Jake Haener steps into that role to be the backup quarterback for, the foreseeable future. And the reason why I mention that is because, look, he had moments where he looked really good in camp, and you would see us tweeting about like, oh yeah, no, see, Jake's good anticipation, good ball placement. He's got a pretty nice arm, all these other things. And we were kind of talking him up and all that, but that's not the same as, can he stand on the sideline with a clipboard and help to make sure that the offense is running, and that the, identifying what he's seeing from the defense and helping your starting quarterback have those conversations on the sideline and things like that. He hasn't seen enough NFL football yet. So that's why I think that the veteran coming in there, it's not just about, can you go out there and play on the field? It's, can you help make the starting quarterback better? And I don't think that Jake Haener yet has the experience to do that, which is not his fault. He's just going into his second year as a quarterback in the NFL. Timing, like that's really all that it is. And so for me, that's what I look at. So if he's able to help with that, then, or once he's able to help with that, once he's seen enough NFL football, NFL speed, breaking down that kind of film on the sidelines or photos on the sidelines, things like that, then I think, yeah, you just transition to Jake Haener being your starting not your starting quarterback, your backup quarterback behind Derek Carr, especially as long as Derek Carr is in the building. They speak the same language, one mentored the other, all these other things. But for right now, I don't see anything wrong with going out and investing in another veteran quarterback that can go out there and help you if they need to go out there and help you, but more importantly, has seen and played and won in the NFL game, or maybe not even won, but seen and played the NFL game, and can help to have those conversations on the sideline with Derek Carr. I think that is the most important. And if you can find somebody that can bridge the gap between the two systems, even better. Doesn't have to be somebody specifically from San Francisco, but somebody that has spent some time in a wide zone system. One of the reasons why I named Ryan Tannehill. All right, coming up next, we're going to take a look at Zack Baun headed to Philadelphia. It's a perfect fit for him, but boy, is it a massive mistake for the New Orleans Saints. We got that coming up for you as we continue on to wrap up today's episode. Locked on Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp Therapy Online is awesome. I've used it since 2020. Having access to therapy, having access to be able to take care of my mental health from the comfort of my own home, it is too unique and too special an opportunity for me to pass up. And if you've been thinking about trying therapy, BetterHelp is the way to go, and you should absolutely give it a shot. Think about it. If you had an extra hour in your day, what would you spend it doing? It's not just about what's going on in your life. It's about what could be going on in your life, how to identify the things that matter to you and spend more time doing them. Therapy can help you with all of that as well. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Take a questionnaire, get matched up with a licensed therapist, and you can even change at no charge if the match doesn't work out. Learn how to make time for the things that make you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Zack Baun might be putting himself in position to get the bag while the New Orleans Saints simply fumbled it. We got all that coming up for you as we continue on to today's episode of Locked On Saints. Don't forget, we are your team every day, so keep you up to date with everything going on around the New Orleans Saints throughout free agency. You're going to have more for you again on tomorrow's episode. And don't forget to come and check out Second and Saints as well with myself and John Hendricks. You can find Second and Saints wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. A little bit more conversational, both John and I, about an hour long, good conversation, all that good stuff. Keep you up to date with everything going on with the New Orleans Saints as well. We're actually going to be doing a live show at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. Hopefully I'll be able to get this out before then so you can come over after that. All right. So appreciate you very much for being here. And I got to say, I appreciate very much that Zack Baun listens to Locked On Saints. I've been saying for probably 2 or 3 years now that Zack Baun would be a perfect fit in Philadelphia, and he gets his first taste in free agency. What does he do? He signs with Philadelphia. Thank you for the co-sign, Zack. No, I'm just playing. It's clearly that was just the right fit for him. According to reports, Zack Baun's expected to land in Philadelphia as an Eagle in free agency. He will not be a New Orleans Saint in 2024. This is a signing that we've all expected, but don't forget, like, these signings can't become official until tomorrow afternoon. On Wednesday when the league year actually begins. But this is just too good a match. Like, it makes too much sense for him to double back or pull an old Will Lutz, right? Will Lutz was supposed to sign with the Jaguars. Then he turned around and said, nah, never mind. I'm going to stay in Denver. I'm just playing. And so now Denver's got everything except for a quarterback. So good for them. But I really think that this is a tale of two sides here. Zack Baun gets a fantastic landing spot with the Philadelphia Eagles. I'll tell you why here in just a moment. And the New Orleans Saints just sort of have to watch it all happen. This kind of stinks for New Orleans because, look, Zack Baun was drafted as a pass rusher out of Wisconsin. 12.5 sacks his final season at Wisconsin, gets to the New Orleans Saints. And the first thing that they do is that they try to be cute. They try to be creative, and they turn him into an off-ball linebacker. Because they saw him, not because they saw him do it a couple of times at the Senior Bowl, but that's always a thing that was kind of quoted, was like, oh yeah, well, he worked out, he looked good doing it at the Senior Bowl and stuff like that. Now, 6'3", 225 pounds, 6'2", 240 pounds, depending upon what you're reading and where. Zack Baun wasn't going to be a full-time pass rusher in this New Orleans Saints system, right? Juxtapose that to 6'6", 280 pounds if you're Carl Granderson, 6'4", 280 pounds if you're Cam Jordan, 6'7", 6'6", 6'5", like all of these guys, Tana Passion, Marcus Davenport, Peyton Turner, Isaiah Foskey's up there, 6'5", I believe. Like, you compare and contrast all that to 6'3", 240 pounds at best, more likely 6'2", 230-ish pounds, right? It wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to happen. But the thing about it here is that it wasn't going to work not because Zack Baun couldn't do it. It wasn't going to work because the New Orleans Saints have a prototype at pass rusher that Zack Baun didn't fit. That's why it wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to work because of the decisions that the New Orleans Saints made, not because of Zack Baun's ability or inability to be able to rush the passer. In the last 5 games that he played, they finally started having him rush the passer, right? So 15 to 20 times per game. I think one game was like 24. During that time, he racked up 2 sacks, got a lot of pressures, got back at the backfield, got hits on the quarterback, was able to help to limit the mobility of opposing quarterbacks, did a good job anytime that a quarterback escaped or scrambled to his side, keeping that gain to a minimum and all those other things. So it's just one of those things that you look at and it was like, okay, that's great, but too little, too late, right? Too little, too late. He had 3 seasons before that, 3 3/4 of a seasons basically before that to be utilized as a pass rusher, and he was just never given that opportunity. And now he's going to go to the Philadelphia Eagles, where the Philadelphia Eagles hate big linebackers. They want their linebackers to be built like safeties, check, and they want linebackers that are going to be small, athletic, fast, and can rush the passer, a la Hassan Reddick, check, with Zack Baun. And so now Zack Baun goes to a Vic Fangio 3-4 defense where he gets to be a stand-up rusher off the edge and do what it is that makes him really, really good. Like the thing that made him draftable, thing that made teams consider taking him in the first round when he was coming into the draft. And the Saints got him in the third round much later. The thing that made him and put him on the map was his ability to rush the passer. And he never got the opportunity to do that here in New Orleans until it was too late, until it was just enough to showcase and say, hey, Philadelphia, look what I can do. Like that's really what it felt like. And so now he's headed to Philadelphia where I think, and I'm sorry to say this, but there's the potential, right? He's not going to walk into a role there. He's got to earn it. But the fact of the matter is that the role and responsibility that he's trying to earn there is better suited for him than the role and responsibility he was trying to earn here as an off-ball linebacker. There it will be as a pass rusher. And so at least a door will be open. There will be a path. The yellow brick road will be laid for him to Dorothy his way all the way down if he's able to get it done. So he still has to prove it. He still has to earn it. But I will say this. I'm afraid that he's going to go to Philadelphia and he's going to be another one of those signings that you look at and go, man, he got so much better. He produced so much more. Why did the New Orleans Saints let him go? It's going to be a Malcolm Jenkins. It's going to be a Trey Hendrickson. This feels like one of those situations. We'll see if it is. We'll see if it isn't. But in any case, Zack Baun's finally getting the opportunity to broach his potential. Unfortunately, it'll be with another team. So now the issue here for the New Orleans Saints is that that's another supplemental pass rusher that they've now lost. So where do you go to find this pass rusher? Well, I will say that the idea of signing Josh Uche, the former defensive end from the New England Patriots, or the defensive end formerly of the New England Patriots, who was just used very differently last year from 2022, where he had 11 and a half sacks, only had less than a handful here in 2023, but his usage was differently. We broke that down in yesterday's episode. But if you're able to land Josh Uche, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, that makes that signing a little bit more impressive, a little bit more substantial, a little bit more impactful. But even if they don't sign him, there are more pass rushers. There's more pass rusher talent out there, and you're going to need it. You're going to need it. So who are some of the players that the Saints could go after? Well, there's Emmanuel Ogbah, 6'4", 260 plus pounds. He kind of checks some of the boxes for the Saints size, but still gives you a little bit of athleticism. Yannick Ngakoue could go back on the list, spent last year with Chicago. His first sub-8 sack season, only had 3 last year. But one of the things that I found about Yannick Ngakoue was a quote from his days with from his days with the Raiders when he was talking about his time with the Baltimore Ravens. And here's what he said. I feel like in Baltimore, I wasn't utilized the right way. That rotation was kind of ugly for me. Pass rushers need rhythm. You need to have multiple players to set up, or you have to have multiple plays rather to set up moves. And I feel like I didn't have that there. That's a pretty big statement because here in New Orleans, you're going to rotate. So maybe the rhythm that Yannick Ngakoue feels that he needs, the rhythm, the rhyme, he's not going to get in a rotation-heavy defense in the way that the New Orleans Saints play. So maybe that wouldn't work out. Chase Young, absolutely one that you can look at if you're willing to allow him to be a speed rusher off the edge. The San Francisco 49ers just signed Yetur Gross-Matos. It doesn't look like they're bringing Chase Young back. He's going to be on the market. I don't think he's going to be incredibly expensive at all. And so I think that he's a guy that you could potentially go to, but you have to let him rush from wide 9. You have to let him line up outside the tight end, get a running start, bend the edge. He's not a speed to power conversion guy. He's not a bull rush guy. So don't try to pigeonhole him to a role that he can't fit as a pass rusher. Saints could also reunite with Kyle Phillips. They could go back down the Jadeveon Clowney pathway. They can go after James Smith-Williams, a guy that I really like. Again, another built guy that brings you build in terms of like what the Saints like at their prototype. Who also brings you some size and athleticism. And don't forget that with losing Zack Baun, not only do the Saints lose a potential help at pass rusher, they also lose a Sam linebacker and a core special teamer. So the Saints could potentially go back to some familiar faces to work with that. Anthony Barr, maybe, right? The Saints almost signed him last year. I've heard some whispers that the decision that Anthony Barr didn't sign with New Orleans wasn't really just about Anthony Barr's side of it all, that maybe the Saints weren't super happy with whatever that was. I don't know. But in any case, that could be a road to go back down. Another one, Eric Wilson, a guy that was impressive in training camp, but ended up landing with the Green Bay Packers. The Packers do want to keep him, but they're busy signing Josh Jacobs right now. Call up Eric Wilson and see what happens. So I do think that you can find another one of those guys. You can bring back an Andrew Dowell. You can wait for Nephi Sewell to be healthy, all those other things and recovered. So they need to figure all of that out. But the sooner that they do, obviously, the better. And the sooner the New Orleans Saints start making free agency moves, the better as well. As we've discussed before, though, it seemed unlikely they were going to get into the first wave. First wave of free agency typically goes through the new league year. So we'll see where the Saints are here over the course of the next couple of days, but we will be keeping you up to date with it every single step of the way here on the Locked On Saints podcast. And you can get it all faster by texting Who Dat to 504-285-7473, joining the Locked On Saints Insider program, where you also get film studies and everything as well. So we appreciate you very much for being here and making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, for your second listen, to go and check out Locked On Pelicans and Locked On LSU as well. Tempers flaring between the LSU and South Carolina women's basketball teams. How does that measure up going into the upcoming March Madness tournament? She's got all of it for you over there. Caroline Fenton at Locked On LSU. Appreciate you as always making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.